All right, everybody. Welcome back to the King's Table podcast. I'm sorry that I missed last week. I wanted to say happy New Year. Hope everyone finished a beautiful 2023 and is excited as much as I am for 2024. I'm joined here with my good friends, Maddie Atchison, Mike Ayala, and Aaron and Muchastegi. Good to see you guys. Happy New Year. I wanted to comment to the audience that remember that you can, or if you're here, you're already listening to YouTube, make sure you subscribe. And if you really want to give us a Christmas present and you are appreciating this podcast, then your obligation is to share it with somebody else that's listening and subscribe to this podcast or this YouTube channel. And make sure that you're sharing. Make sure you guys are commenting. We're seeing a lot of really great comments. The engagement has been fantastic, and we just want to continue to grow. Actually, just so you guys know too, I had a couple of guys that reached out to me on Instagram. They're like, "Hey, dude, you guys are doing great. I love all the content. I have some questions." So it's been really fun to see everybody engage with the content. But just a good reminder to subscribe and leave us comments. Happy New Year, boys. So much fun stuff going on. You guys had a really great episode last week. We were just riffing before we started talking. So I'm not going to talk about predictions. We're not going to talk about bests. Maybe we'll prepare for another episode for that. Everyone else is doing that too. But just what's going on in the world, guys? Where are you at? What's on your minds? And we were just riffing about a few different random topics. How are you guys setting up either your businesses, your mindset, your schedules, your calendars? Are you guys caught up in goals? Are you caught up in calendaring everything? Where is your guys' mindset as we walk in here? We're recording on the third couple days before we launch. Where's your mind at? Where are we at walking into 2024? And where should people be at?
Before we jump in, like the sage, like Indian dad, like energy that Ash is bringing to the call today, I feel like you better bring some fire today. Is a real quick question. Is your dad like a strict Indian dad, or is he more of like a relaxed, like wise sage, doesn't have to say a lot, but
my
commands,
dad?
like, yeah.
Oh no, my dad is very patient and calm. And when he says something, you listen. And he's gotten more fun as he's gotten older, but in his like mid 40s, he was like a middle, like I don't want to say middle of the ferry, but very reliable, trustworthy dude, quiet. We're super different.
I love it.
You know what's interesting about Ashish? I met Ashish in January of 2021. I think that's when we connected. And the one thing that I've realized about you, I mean, we've had hours and hours and hours of calls and podcasts and, different calls. Dude, I can tell the minute you get on the screen or I know what Ashish I'm getting. And Maddie did such a great job of calling that out today, because off camera, like Ashish was chewing our ass. He was like taking command. Ashish has like 7 different personality types.
He's back.
I love it.
It's true. Back. I do. It's
new year, new Ashish, or the new Ashish
year. And Ashish needed to take off last week and sit around and do nothing. Spend some time with my girls. Walk around the woods aimlessly. So I really needed these last 2 weeks to just recover. It's been a rough few months, and we all have those seasons. But yeah, I'm back, baby. I'm back. I never really left, but I'm just back more.
It's like when J-Cal takes off the All In podcast. He just wanted to see if we could actually do it without him.
I'll take that as a compliment.
For sure he was going to come on. I was waiting for him to like sneak on or be in the background or be like texting AJ and be like, are they doing it? Did they show up?
I didn't want to ruin. I have terrible signal problems with you guys, right? I have a lot of technical glitches, so I didn't want to add to that. But let's start. Mikey, how are you doing, brother? What's going on in your life?
I'm doing good, man. I've had some amazing calls to start off the year. I feel really focused. I haven't gotten in the weeds on this, but I probably spent the majority of 2023, at least the second half, the first half figuring out, what was working, what wasn't working. The second half, I mean, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and they'll be like, dude, I haven't seen you. I haven't talked to you. You haven't been to any events. And I spent the last probably 6 months of, 2023 just getting really focused, shedding some things that, were no longer serving me. And I think it's really important. I think a lot of us on this podcast and really, I think a lot of people out there's always a lot of conversation, the second half of December and into January, like what's the goals and what's new. And man, I feel like I had some clarity going into October, November, and just really had my head down and working through some things. So I feel like I've hit the ground running. I'm ready to kind of rebuild. Again, I think sometimes when you have to stop, you have to kind of cut deeper than what you want to and restructure. And that was really the last half of 2023 for me, was just restructuring. So I'm excited. I'm ready to go. Got some new partners I'm working with on, different areas with vendors and stuff. So I think it's going to be a good year.
Mr. Atchison.
It's funny how a little rest and recharge always does the body good. Anytime I've gone and done, a spiritual retreat or a business retreat, and I really carve out time to like pause, reflect, disconnect. It's such a good thing for especially hard charging entrepreneurs that never turn their minds or their schedules or their bodies off. I'm reminded of how much recovery and the impact of that recovery I can get by just little windows of rest and relaxation. And I'm feeling the same way, extremely inspired and motivated. And I think the number one thing for me this year that I didn't have last year, post sale and exit of my hotels and all that kind of stuff, was I just didn't have a lot of clarity in what I was giving my energy, my team to. You guys have heard me talk about I'm a mission driven person, and I was really kind of lacking that vision around my mission going forward. And we spent really a significant amount, the whole team, in the office in Q4, really focusing on making sure we got a full 12 months of a clear vision, a clear and shared mission, who we're serving, who's responsible for each one of those items, how we can level up accountability, support, leadership. And I can just feel the energy is drastically different throughout our office right now, through people's personal routines and how they're showing up to the office. So it's good when you can be in those moments, in those seasons, right? And I'm definitely doubling down and trying to, build that bigger and faster and stronger as we get further into the year. But I also think too, right now is important I hear a lot of people doing 75 hard and going extreme on that reset. And don't get me wrong, when your pendulum is so far swung in the wrong direction, sometimes you need those extreme resets to either course correct or build momentum back in the right direction, or just to challenge yourself to pop the lid and try and break through a ceiling that, you might be feeling stagnant or something along those lines. But the other thing that I'm trying to think about too is, finding a way to, instead of maybe metaphorically doing the 75 hard, these extreme sprints, which don't get me wrong, I'm all about being a glutton for punishment and doing that at strategic times throughout the year. But I also think, kind of the metaphorical 365 medium is what I'll call it, where doing something consistently for 365 days a year that you can sustain is foundationally important for all the facets of your life. I would rather have people focus on finding what that rhythm looks like than the people that are constantly having the high spikes and the big drops. So that's what we're focused on, is what can everybody do to find that rhythm of 365 at a baseline productivity at work. And then of course, outside of the office, and really trying to create that gradual improvement no matter what's happening. If you're off a little bit, that's okay. But we know we got those default things that we're consistently falling back on that keep us moving in the right direction. So we're fired up.
Mooch.
I love that tagline, 365 medium. I want to be 365 medium instead of, that's not how I do stuff, unfortunately. I know, right? I do all or nothing too much. My personality, I remember.
He does 725.
Man, I remember sharing a conversation with one of my high school buddies, and it was probably after the second time I went broke or something. But I was back on where I was making lots of money per month or something. But I'm sharing the stories with him, and he's been at the same company since he graduated from college. And I remember him saying, I think he goes, I think my appetite for risk is just a lot smaller than yours, Aaron. He's like, I'm okay with like having my job and getting slight raises each year and getting more. He just goes, my appetite for risk. Like he's like, I will never make $100,000 in a month, but I will never lose $100,000 in a month either. And so the 365 medium would be awesome. But I think the cool part about that, even though it's just a funny headline, the put one step in front of the other for the next 30 days, the next 60 days, the next 125 days, next 365 days, whatever the little habit is, it's amazing. If it's like, hey, I'm going to wake up 15 minutes earlier for the next year, right? That'll have significant impacts in someone's life. I'm going to wake up 30 minutes earlier for the next year. I'm like, take one little habit that's actually really easy to make an adjustment on if you're struggling. I'm struggling right now with figuring out what my annual plan should be. I am in some rough seasons, and coming out of that and knowing like, okay, there's some certain things that I have clarity on of this is what I'm going to do with this one of my companies or this one of my companies. There's certain things that I have clarity on. There's certain things that I have business clarity on, but figuring out like, do I have the right team members to help me and who's going to be doing what, and some things that I don't really know. And so I found myself on New Year's Eve going, and mind you, every other New Year's Eve, I read my chapter of what I did for the year. I reflect on it. I look at my annual goals, which ones I crossed off, which ones I didn't. I modify the whiteboard. I come up with the next year. And I sat there this time and I was like, man, I got a lot of the stuff done that I wanted to, but I had a lot of new wreckage come in that I wasn't ready for, all sorts of things. And all I could find myself doing was like, what I really hope is and I saw people posting, man, I can't wait for 2023 to be over. That was mostly my sentiment. I had a lot of people saying but like one of my daughters, 2023 was like the best year of her life. Like she crushed it. Like she had the most amazing time. Actually, two of my daughters at least. And so my big reflection was going, if you had a great 2023, I hope your 2024 is better. And if you had a crappy 2023, I hope your 2024 is better, because both things are possible and it's the amazing thing to focus on. And I guess the only part of the goals or focus that I want to share was this I was having a conversation with some people last night. And really it was us before we came on, and I'm talking about karaoke, right? Like they were asking me like, public speaking, what was public speaking like? How did you get to be good at that on stage? Or what was it like, with the podcast or with golf and everything else? And what I said was like, and it wasn't to be cocky or anything, but it was like, I can be the best at anything, right? Like I'm really good at everything that I want to be good at, but because I know the formula, right? And the formula is you say, I want to be good at that this year. So at the beginning of the year right now, people should come up with some hobbies. I want to shoot a 75 golf in this year. I want to be good at, I want to start beating my friends at pickleball. I want to be able to do a handstand and hold it for 20 seconds, whatever it is, right? I want to be able to do a 360 when I'm surfing behind my boat. Those aren't super important in life, but you should have something like that every year. That's this new thing that's fun that you like accomplished. Well, the formula is come up with the goal and then get started and put in the reps and then get like lessons from somebody, lessons and coaching from somebody, and then put in the reps again and review the tape and fine tune. Like that's the solution to how you get good at anything. If you want to be able to do a 365 surfing, you say, I want to be able to do this. And then you get Mike's son to come coach you on the boat, and you go, all right, I'm going to get Dylan to coach me a week a month for the next 4 months. And I'm going to be doing that. And then you're going to get the tape, because life is about putting in the reps. Was I great at podcasts when I started? No. Like you listen to some of the first ones when I first took over.
Not that good, actually.
Like I'm right.
Hate to
I'm still
break
getting
it to
better.
you, bud.
I'm still getting better. But man, you should have heard me at the beginning when I took over. If you guys don't like me now, you really wouldn't have liked me stuttering over my words when I took over for Pat. But just like anything, you put in the reps or public speaking. First time you're on stage doing something, you're like, how is this? So anybody setting forth their goals right now, as you're thinking about the year, you can get good at anything, absolutely anything. The formula is really simple. So get some formal lessons, put it in your reps, watch the tape, like review what you're doing, and then fine tune. And you can get good at whatever you want. And so I tell you, maybe my only goal is that by my Real Estate Rockstars Mastermind in March, I'm going to crush karaoke. But in the meantime, if you're a good karaoke singing coach, reach out to me, because I need a coach.
Are you going to sing karaoke on the podcast? Can that be like the debut, your debut?
That's going to actually be the new lead-in music. The new lead-in music for like our intro music will be just clips of Aaron doing karaoke.
Dude, Mooch, we're trying to gain followers, not lose them.
Well, we're on YouTube though. So they'll see my Eminem hair, and we'll get to do it. But Happy New Year, guys! I guess in the summary of all of it, like some stuff I have clarity on, some stuff I don't. But I do know there's a formula to make all your goals come true. There's a formula to get good at anything, and so I think people just need to be putting the baby steps together, doing 365 medium. Figure out what do you got to do every day to make a big change.
That's right.
Life. Make the change.
Well, I love all those answers. I think for me, the new year is just such an opportunity to just click restart on whatever you want to click restart on. If you want things to continue, you just plow through it. If you want to stop things, you stop them and you have a new opportunity. So that's how I kind of approach it. I think we as high charging guys, especially for me, I have no problem making lists and lists of stuff that I want to do. And right before New Year's, I was like up all night by myself, journaling and getting, the GoBundance one sheet going and having 50 things I wanted to add on there. And I'll tell you what happened to me is I woke up on the 1st and I'm like, yeah, no. 2024 for me is going to be a year of less is more. And I think that you guys were saying this on the podcast last time is, building a personal brand, it's a grind. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Building a business, growing a business, learning new skills, learning new businesses, managing teams. There's just so many things that go behind the scenes of what this audience or other people see in our lives. And I think we have this like burning desire to do more, and we have this capacity and capability. And I think that's what keeps us moving forward. For me in 2023, I really learned that, we made a lot of progress, but there were things that I should have cut earlier, people I should have cut earlier, things I should have done that I shouldn't have done, things like that. And so I'm walking in more as an adult, more mature into 2024, figuring out what do I really need to say no to in my life, and where do I not need to be so youthfully exuberant and get too excited. And so that's the energy I'm walking into. So I woke up with a one sheet that was full and then took out 30% of it and just scratched a bunch of shit out. Yeah, do less. And honestly, if those things are meant to happen, they're going to happen anyways. But it allows you to focus on the 50, 70% that really needs your intention, not attention, but intention. And those things will just create peace and joy and happiness all around. And I think for the company, I think we had our best year ever. It was definitely tumultuous because we had like 2.5x growth in 1 year. Not because we did something amazing. We just survived after 2 years of just slaughter.
Does tumultuous mean good? That's like the biggest word I've heard on here.
Yeah. No, muchastegi is the longest word we have.
Okay, but the vocabulary-wise, you guys are smarter than me.
So
I thought we actually called him Mooch because we couldn't say a muchastegi.
Yeah, it took me a few weeks, bro. It took me a few weeks, but that's the energy I'm walking into. I feel like I'm very centered. I don't want to do more. Mike has taught me this. It's like be, do, have, right? Who do we need to be to have what we want? So that's where I'm coming from. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been such an amazing journey of launching this podcast. I'm so excited for it to continue. I do want to talk about people because Maddie, you were alluding to this, getting our teams aligned. I definitely had made some decisions with staff that have served me and some decisions that haven't served me. And I probably should have pulled the plug way sooner. And when you don't pull the plug, you end up paying for it. I want to know sort of what your guys' experiences have been in terms of, what's the worst hire you've ever made? And what did you do about it? And what did you learn from it? I'll share my maybe I'll go last, but Mikey, why don't we start with you? What is your mindset on this? I know we've talked about it in the last couple of weeks where you had some surprises, and we all have recently. But what is the worst hire you've made, and then how are you communicating to the team moving forward in 2024?
Such a good topic.
It's crazy. Yeah, I enjoy this topic because I think no matter how great we get at hiring or picking partners or any of that, I don't think it ever ends. And I constantly am just reflecting. I mentioned this on a previous show, but GoBundance had a guy on at one point in time, and he was talking about C players, B players, A players, and he only hires A players. But this guy's a multi billionaire, right? And it had me, this was in 2020, and it had me just really thinking about, how many times have I heard that statement of, hire A players, like you got to hire A players. But what I've realized is, like, compared to that guy and what he's been through and who he's hired, like, I don't even know if I know what an A player is yet. I don't even know if I'm an A player in that guy's world, right? Like, I don't even know if I would hit the mark as an A player. And so I wanted to just say that to start off with, because I think, number one, we have to give ourselves some grace. We have to give our hiring managers grace. The audience needs to give themselves grace, because every time we make a bad decision, we learn from it. One of my early contractors that I worked for, he always said the only bad decision is indecision. So anyway, I'll preface this by saying that, I've made a ton of mistakes over the years, and I've just found myself thinking, like, who do I have to become? It's kind of what you were talking about a few minutes ago, Ash. Like, who do I have to become in order to attract, like, a true A player, somebody that, whether it's in finance or, if you're looking for a chief investment officer or a chief operating officer or whatever it is for your organization, it could just be, a supervisor in the field, whatever. Like, who do you actually have to become in order to attract that person? Who do I have to become? So I've really been thinking about that a lot. To answer your question, the worst hire I've ever made, and I think this will just reinforce my point here. It was late 2017, we went out to market to find a director of operations for our mobile home park organization. I think we were at 26 mobile home park communities at that point in time. I think we had like 2,700 lots, something like that, 13 different states. I think we were approaching like 100 employees. It was just getting to a point where it was way too much for me. And so we went out to market. We hired a recruiter, best of the best in the industry.
Of course.
Yeah. And they went through their process, and they brought us like 30 different candidates. We went through the interview process, and we actually ended up hiring. And there's that old statement in business, like, everybody that you want to hire in your organization is already working for someone else. If someone's unemployed, maybe they just quit a job or whatever because they're, moving on to something else. But for the most part, everybody that you're looking for that you actually want working for you is already working for somebody else. We're not like on the unemployment line. So we go hire a recruiter, and we finally narrowed it down to like 3 candidates, and we ended up picking this guy. I won't mention his name. It wasn't Aaron Amuchastegui. We ended up picking this guy that we actually convinced him to leave the company that he was with. And he was with a top 10 owner operator in the manufactured housing space, had a huge resume in the storage facility space. He started out in private equity. We brought him on, and I'll tell you what, like 8 months later, my company was like, it was like Rome. It was like in shambles, man. It was one of the worst experiences I had ever been through. And this guy, come to find out, like, it was just a bad culture fit at the end of the day. I don't think he was a bad person, but I think he had, we were comparatively a pretty small organization, and he just was not a great culture fit. And so I think it was just a lesson for me. And, resumes can be best, pedigrees can be the best, but at the end of the day, you could take somebody that has been part of a 100 million or $1 billion organization, and they might not be a good fit in a $100 million organization if they've been part of a $1 billion one. And the guy, I think he was also having some serious like family challenges, and one of the deals was he had to relocate, and when it came time to relocate, he wouldn't do it. I almost lost like 3 really good employees that 2 of them are still with me. One of them just like crying, and she's like, I normally wouldn't go around somebody, but you got to know what's going on here. And it's amazing how, and I was still pretty like really connected to the company too, and I didn't know what was happening. So it was just a ton of lessons. And again, I think we have to be easy on ourselves. We have to learn the lesson, but we also have to realize at the end of the day that, I mean, I probably would consider him a C player at this point in time, but I honestly thought I was hiring an A player. And so I think the more we go through this and the more we grow and the more challenges we face in business, the more we get to understand like what is truly an A player, B player, C player. And there's people that we're also going to outgrow as an organization too. I mean, somebody that is an A player in our organization today might not fit in their role 12 months from now or 36 months from now because the organization has outgrown them. So I think this is a good topic, and I think it's important.
Maddie, we lost
our
Ashish
host
with his technology errors. He like called it, but what would you say? What was your? I mean, I guess the question started is what was your worst hire, right?
I mean, my worst hire was always around contractors, and just because that was a big world that I was working in when I was flipping more volume. But internally on my team, it's usually been some type of leadership role that impacted other people as a result. And I remember, man, this was early in GoBundance when I was hanging with Osborne and he did a little breakout session and he was talking about how it was about hiring and attracting a talent essentially into your organization. And he said something that has always kind of struck with me in terms of, and I think this can apply to anybody, when you're thinking about hiring or recruiting or creating a reason for people to engage with your company, your culture, your brand, is if I came into your business today and I followed you around or the leadership team around, would I promote them? Would I demote them, or would I fire them out of the business? And I think when people do like that real honest self-reflection of like who the CEO or the leadership team is, it's an interesting thought to think about what level of performance your existing team is at. And or if you recruited a really talented individual who came into your organization and they scored each of your individuals, would that attract the A player like Mike is talking about? Or would that resonate with maybe a B- player and they go, oh, I can fit in here, right? So I think that's something that always resonates with me when I think about that as one, am I showing up as a person that if somebody of real talent who came into my business would go, damn, like that dude deserves a promotion. Like he's leading this thing into the fire. I want to be a part of that. Or would he be like, ooh, that guy is really not playing at the level that I thought he was. Like he should probably be playing down there. Shit, that guy needs to get out of the way. Like he's in the way here, right? So I think that was important. And I did an exercise at a real estate conference 7 or 8 years ago, and there was a framework and a process they had for how much, based on your business, your revenue, the timeline for hiring, all of the people that are involved in that hiring and training and onboarding process, the comp package of when you had to let that person go, potential litigation costs, the disruption in revenue, lost customers. And so they had this formula and this framework, and it was insane to see how expensive and disruptive just one bad hire can be to an organization. And I'm talking, depending on your company and your revenue levels, I'm talking at a minimum 6 figures, if not upwards of 7 figures, that one potential bad hire, depending on their level and status that you're bringing them into, could totally fuck your organization up and do such either one irreparable damage or in a very big way, massive drawbacks to your organization. And so it's so critical when you're talking about that hiring and onboarding process to having a clear job description, a clear hiring process for how you vet and go through these things, the slow to hire, quick to fire kind of mindset, and then making sure that you're empowering people when they're onboarded into your organization actually succeed and excel in what it is that you're asking of them. And then I think obviously the last piece is the addition and elevation of culture through good hires or the deterioration and pullback of culture with bad hires is so important. So for me, going through that process myself, it really just reaffirmed on the values of the organization being front and center in most of those discussions. Also the acknowledgement and the elevation of somebody based on alignment with culture and values, as well as maybe some course correction or some some changes need to be made and reparations need to be made based on, misalignment with culture and core values. So those have been some of the lessons I learned, but it was just a major emphasis and reminder that one great hire could, you pay them $100K and they bring in 7 figures for you, and that's a big win. But one bad hire could also cost you 7 figures in the process.
Yeah. And Ashish was back, and now he's gone for a minute. So I'll drive until he's back all the way. But Matt, you didn't answer the question of who was your worst hire, or if you don't want to answer who, or it's tough because there's a bunch of them. What I like the question better of, because I was at those same things with Osborne. What did your worst hire cost you, or what was the most a bad hire has ever cost you? Do you know? Did you do some analysis?
Yeah, well, easily one that comes to mind was a contractor, a development partner that I hired and kind of JV'd with without doing the proper due diligence, rushing into it. It was also kind of uncharted territory for me in a new kind of development realm that I was leaning on that person.
What do you think it cost you?
And on paper, it cost me $280,000. That's what I lost. Yeah. But that's not including all of my manpower. That's not including the salaried, people that I had going and participating in those projects with me. That's just what I lost personally on paper. So that was an expensive lesson, to learn on that front. The other one comes to mind in terms of partnerships.
So I'll continue driving for a minute till Ashish gives us the all thumbs that he's back and his internet's rocking. Before I answer, I want to show you guys something. Since Ashish is letting me hijack, I'm going to hijack fully. So our King's Table shirts I've been working on. We've got the Who Told You That with the At the King's Table podcast from YouTube. That was Mike's quote. We've got a few different options for those King's Table shirts. One of my favorite ones, though, that we started with, our mock-up number 1 here, is we have Awake is better than woke.
Baby.
This way. We got some options. That's going to be my new favorite. I know Kurt's going to buy one for sure. We'll have at least one of our fans out there buying that one. Or I have the other version of Awake is better than woke, right? Like, boom.
This is what happens when I let Mooch drive.
I know. Well, so anyway, so I'm back. I was really glad that Matt tailored the conversation back to. So I don't know. The worst. Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know if you saw this, but I have your quote for this week. It's 365 medium.
That's why I pulled up the shirt. Because I saw the shirt said 365 medium, and so I was like, "Oh God, I got to show you guys. I'm actually serious. Our shirts are getting made and ready, and we're gonna love
King's Table website is merch store is open.
Merch store of quotes from the boys is what it's gonna. Quotesfromtheboys.com is what we're gonna be. So worst. I like the question of worst hire ever. I was going to say the same thing. I went through the exercise that Matt did. That why is hiring so important? Why is firing so important? Why is it better to hire before you need somebody? Because then you have the time, like hire based on the staff you're going to need 3 months from now, because then you will have the time to find the right person. Because if you hire based on the staff you needed yesterday, you hire the wrong people. You won't fire people that you need because you're like, well, 50% output's better than none right now because we're so stuck. But I did the same analysis of like, what did the most expensive hire cost you? And my masterminds I host at my office, I have the guys do the same thing. Because I once had an employee steal $270,000 over a period of a year, writing checks, signing my name, going back into QuickBooks and like categorizing them. That was devastation. That was heartbreak, because that was somebody that was like a really high up in my company. But the funny thing was they were actually also making me more money than that. So that was heartbreaking, but they were like an A player, except for they were such an A player. They figured that they earned more money, that they deserved more money than our agreement was. And so that was, and really found a way for the company to make more money for me to not notice for a while until market really started to shift. I had an employee that approved checks to a contractor. It was essentially, our policy was we approve checks. Once pictures come in, we verify, we send multiple verification. And essentially the idea was like never rush payment. It's always a battle because contractors saying, hey, we need to get paid. And we had this contractor out in Florida that had been doing a whole bunch of work for us. And he sent us invoices, and then he started calling my employee that was in charge of payments and like pulling at his heartstrings and going, hey, it's going to be Black Friday. I know I'm not supposed to get paid till next week, but I got to go Christmas shopping. Well, this final bill was like a $200 and something thousand bill, final draw on like 6 different remodels. He rushed it. He signed the check without the pictures coming in. We actually had a flight scheduled for the next week to go site visit. And we got to the first house and nothing was done on it. And we found that the guy, essentially the Florida contractor, had completely committed fraud. But this wasn't about hiring the wrong contractor. It was about my employee who did not follow policy that would have easily avoided this and avoided that lawsuit and things like that. So I remember when there was a guy that worked for my dad as a head estimator that taught me how to estimate when I worked for my dad for a couple of years. And he said, my job as an employee is to, he essentially said, to make your dad more money than I lose him. He said, when I'm an estimator, there's a good chance you're also going to miss some things, and you're going to estimate a job and you're going to bid the job and you're going to lose 30 grand on it. And he said it was inevitable. The first time he did like something for my dad where he like missed a section of like steel beams, and so they lost money on the job because they outbid it. And he goes, that's going to happen in this industry, in their construction industry. But his job was to make my dad more than he lost him. I thought that was pretty profound. But yes, when you figure out like how much your worst, so I'm worst employee, at least a $500,000 loss when it comes to time, cost, energy, things like that. Unfortunately, I have 5 or 6 of those examples that are over 6 figures, that really last. But it does tell you hire slow, fire fast. And if you're not willing to spend time and effort and money to hire the right team member and hire them early when you can, then you are going to spend way more money trying to get rid of them. So I still make the mistake sometimes. I meet somebody, they're exciting, they're fun. Hey, they're going to be a good culture fit. I want them in my world somehow. I'll just hire them or something. But most of the time that doesn't work out very well. So
Mooch, how do you fire fast? Everyone says that we should fire fast. That was going to be one of my comments, but how are you really firing fast?
So in the best way you will do it is when you hire, you say we have a 60 and a 90-day trial, and we're going to review it both times to see if you're going to keep your job in place. And so if you set it up at the very beginning, it makes it a little bit easier, where day one, you put 2 dates on the calendar, your 60-day review and your 90-day review, and say, we are going to hire you temporarily, and then these are going to be your 2 review dates, and that's when we're going to decide if it's the right fit or not. Right. So if you're clear at the beginning, it helps.
How do you decide that at the executive level? Maybe Mike, you chime in too. Like when you may not want anyone at that level to even make a decision. You're not allowed to make a decision for 60 days. You're just in learning. How do you do that with an executive level person? With a transactional level person, you can determine whether or not they're adding value or getting the work done or whatever in 30 to 60 days. But a strategic, executive, they may not know enough about your entire ecosystem to provide enough input or decision making in that much time. What do you do then?
I'll answer really quick and see what everybody else says. I think it's a tougher one to quantify, but the reality is yeah,
good answer.
You just know right away. Like, does it feel like, square peg, round hole, or does it feel like this is making sense? Like, is he speaking the same language? When I say like, oh yeah, this is the type of way we do this, are they like, yeah, they've learned the same thing or not? Because C-level stuff, they should be freaking experts, and they should know, and they should be the fit, and it should be like super familiar to them. And if it's not, I don't think there's a whole lot of pivoting people can do into different styles. I do
Mike,
have, go ahead, jump off me.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, if we know, why don't we do it?
That's a good question.
Well, I don't want to make excuses for us, but I read a Harvard Business Review paper a long time ago that said it takes somebody 8 months to really figure out their job. So I think we have to segment what we're really talking about here, even just back to what Aaron just said, because if you know, then that's probably a culture type fit. Do they fit in the organization, or just black and white? This is just the wrong person. If you know, and it's, black and white, they just don't have the experience or the pedigree to do this job. And then yeah, it's easy to fire quick. If it's a culture fit, I think you're going to know early on too. But I think the challenge with hiring, especially at more complicated positions and levels, is, as Harvard said, I mean, it takes 8 months for somebody to really figure out their job. So, in my case, I think the guy was with me for 10 months or 12 months. I knew earlier, just from a cultural standpoint. But Ashish, to your first question, how do you do the 90-day thing? So even if, and that was the case with this particular individual, even if you're not letting them make decisions and you're saying, hey, look, for the first 60 days, you're watching, you're sitting in meetings, that doesn't mean that person shouldn't be giving you back their feedback on what they see, what they would be doing, the changes they would be making. I think if you're going to make somebody sit for 60 days without getting involved with your team at that C level or, even more management level stuff, I think really just spending time with them and getting their viewpoints on, what they would be doing if they were making decisions today, because you're going to get a pretty good pulse on their decision-making ability after that. But if it's a culture issue, you probably are going to know sooner rather than later.
I think for me, there's plenty of bad decisions. I think beyond what everyone has said here, and I'm not going to repeat it, I think I have to get better at learning how to cut faster. I think we end up being very patient, very kind, giving people the benefit of the doubt. But if your gut is really telling you that this is probably not a good fit, and there are things instinctually that you are just like, oh, that was a little weird, or that I wouldn't have not even get close to that decision being made, or wow, that interaction was awkward. I think you have to address those things like right there and then on the spot. Like, wait, how did you get here? Or like, why did you deal with this way? And I think that's the lesson for me in a couple of recent ones, to be able to pull the plug faster. I think also what we think is like, what, the insurance policy is like, let's just keep it going for a few more months and see, and let's provide some cover and we'll see what happens. But reality is, I think the organization knows whether somebody fits too quickly. And it's better just to pull the plug on somebody than to like try to make it fit. It actually makes us, the answer for me has been, it's like the insecurity of leadership to pull the plug faster. It's like, oh, well, it's going to reflect on my poor decision-making that I pulled somebody into the organization that wasn't a good fit. It's like, how did they even make this decision? Well, just be patient. Let's see what happens. Let it work itself out, guys.
I think there is that legal concern too. Like kind of like what you said, like you don't like before you fire somebody, you want to like lay the groundwork. So you want to like quickly put in the things. Like I think you kind of alluded to that, like taking the steps first instead of doing it right away.
Well, I also have I have a current situation. This is going to go live soon, but that's okay. Is that I have a current situation where I'm like, cut it now. And I have HR and I have some ops folks telling me like, slow down. You need to take your time. You need to have a 30-day severance. But I'm like, no,
right.
Cut it today. No severance. Like this needs to go. This is a virus. This is really bad. And so you end up having these outer forces too. And as a business owner, you got to understand like, what risk am I willing to take? What risk am I not willing to take? The only other last thing I'll add is on the lower level positions, the more transactional positions, I don't have this issue. But in more executive leadership positions, Mike, you know about this, is like when you're giving that much authority to somebody, this happened to me twice. People end up speaking on your behalf. And I think that it's a really dangerous thing to let other people speak on your behalf. And I've learned that lesson where like nobody speaks for me except for me. If you have an opinion and you want to go and use that authority in the organization to go try things and experiment things, that's all great and dandy. Go ahead. But do not go in the organization that Ashish said, this is what he wants to do. This is what he wants to do. And if I didn't say that, I've caught that a couple of times. And that's a really treacherous slope. And so that's one thing I really look out for. And I make it super clear in our organizations. Like, look, I can be cavalier. I can say a lot of things. I can do a lot of things, but I am me, not you. You are you. Do not speak on my behalf. Like, let me say what I want to say. You do you. But it's very dangerous when people at that level use you as a tool to get what they want. It's not necessarily what the company wants or what you want. It's what they want. And they can use you as a tool. So that got to be careful of. in all parts of the organization. I think that's an issue. But Mooch, you pulling up something, or Maddie, go ahead.
I remember seeing this when I was going through a program called Recruit Select. Was essentially how to recruit, identify talent, select them, onboard them properly, all that good stuff. And this one has rang true so many times. And it's very interesting. Aaron or Mike, you said a little bit of this earlier. It's like when you get an A player and you've never had one before, you feel it, you see it. That impact is felt immediately, right? And they really do fall into this category of talent: pushes for solutions, shares your goals, and fulfills your needs as a natural byproduct of fulfilling their own. Knows what they want or is actively searching to know. Pushes you constantly, is continuing to raise the bar. Wants to be associated with talent. Usually focuses their talk on language of challenge and achievement. Gives energy, right? And I don't need to go through the non-talent side, but I'll wrap it up on this so we can segue into another discussion. But it made me think about how I think the biggest challenge that most entrepreneurs struggle with when it comes to hiring is the fact that we are all humans and we drive most of what we do with emotion, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. And so we find ways of subconsciously or consciously creating stories and narratives that either buy somebody a little bit more time, or maybe they'll course correct, or, oh, that's not that big of a deal. But it reminds me of a mastermind I was in with Gary Keller like 6 or 7 years ago. And it became one of my favorite quotes. I say it all the time. I use it all the time. I've tweaked it a little bit. But he said something to me that I think applies to this narrative around hiring and talent acquisition, and also either keeping them or letting them go. And he basically said on this exact topic, slow to hire, fast to fire, was I am a loving person, but my standards are not.
Yes,
And
that's so good.
When
I need to do that more.
when you think about most human beings, we care about other people. Naturally, it's just the way we are. We're not out to screw somebody over. We're not out to, make a buck off of somebody's back, and not like, we care about people. We want to give people an opportunity. We want to make their lives better, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you run your own business, right? We are in the business of making impact. Yes, we like money. Yes, we like freedom. But at the end of the day, we're all passionate about creating a difference and an impact through what we're doing in business. And so we let us as human beings trying to love one another actually trump leading each other and holding each other to a standard and a status that is ruthless, that is non-negotiable. And at leadership levels or even lowership levels in organizations, I think when you think about the people who get the most results and have built some of the most insane businesses, when I heard that quote, and then it was like a month later and I read Elon Musk's biography, I was like, holy shit, this dude is ruthless. He has got a mission. He's got standards around that mission. And if there's one person that is not upholding that standard, it could have been his best assistant and employee of the longest standing. The second she dropped below the bar, boom, gone. Didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So I just think about those people, right, who have really clear standards in their business. And the second anybody drops below that, there's either a very quick course correction conversation or there's a very quick decision that they are able to make and keep it moving. And they check the emotion at the door and say, we're in the game of business right now. I can still love you off the court. But if we're playing to win this game and you're not bringing the winning A game to this team, you're either on the bench or you're out. And that's where some of the most ruthless, but most successful, the Kobe Bryants, the Dwayne Wades, the LeBron James, the Michael Jordans, when it was on the court, if you weren't pulling your weight or you weren't at the bar or better, you were going to hear about it. Most likely you weren't going to be around for very long if that was the case.
Mike?
All the greats are emotionless. I'm just going to single that as Mike turns him in. But those people that are the greats, like the great CEOs that are mean and emotionless when it came to their people.
I don't know if they're mean. They're just emotionless. Meaning they just have such a high standard.
They just don't care.
You can't get caught up with the personality of it, because you're trying to deliver results.
It's interesting, like, whether it's Gary Keller or Michael Jordan or whatever too. I mean, we're a pretty young group here. And I think the lessons learned along the way, every time I used to work for a gold mine and there was these things called cardinal rules, and what they meant was, the reason why they were called cardinal rules is because somebody had died. And so if you broke a cardinal rule on a mine site, no questions asked, you and your company is kicked off. The person that did it for sure, because it was written in blood in a previous thing. But I think, even thinking about Warren Buffett and the fact that he made, 70% of his net worth or whatever after he was 60, I think as we get older and we have more of these black eyes under our belt, we probably get more ruthless, because every time we take a black eye. So for the young business owners that are out there, yes, it's a lot easier and less expensive to learn from somebody else's mistake. But unfortunately, I think we have to learn from the mistakes. The devil's advocate comment that I wanted to make, and I think I'm not making an excuse around this, but I think one of the reasons why sometimes we fire so slow, especially at the management upper levels, I've often thought about this. I think the razor's edge, it's such a fine line between, again, if it's a culture issue or whatever, then let bygones be bygones. But when people are growing in your organization, they're going to make mistakes. And I think sometimes, so many times, I've thought about whether it was a service manager or, an executive that we hired or whatever. I think about all the mistakes that I've made, and, how many times I've been hot-headed and, treated people the way that I shouldn't have, and all the things that I would probably fire this person for in a heartbeat. Yet I've made the same mistake. So I've come back to the point where, I try to look at it like, okay, how easy would have it been for me to make that mistake? In the case that Aaron was talking about in Florida, not easy. Maybe in his early days, but that was a black and white mistake. Should have not happened, cut and dry. But, Ashish, you were talking about, whether it's toxicity or the way that, somebody speaks to somebody, or a mistake that they make, or I probably wouldn't have done it that way. And then I think about myself 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 2 years ago, and how many mistakes I've made, how many people I treated horribly along the way because I was stressed out. And when I make a mistake in my organization, who sees it? Very few people see it. Maybe nobody, maybe only me. But when I'm looking at somebody that's the person right next to me, I see every mistake that they're making. And so I'm not making excuses for them, but I think that's some of the reason why it's so challenging. Again, unless it's a culture issue or whatever, so challenging to fire somebody without giving them an opportunity to grow and learn and make some mistakes too. So it's hard. I think that's the bottom line, is it's freaking hard.
That's why very few do it. Well, let's talk about where the world is going, because I think there's some really fascinating things, and we've alluded to some of these concepts recently. Moochie just put into the chat, U.S. auto sales softened at the end of the year. Bloomberg estimates as buyers backed at 10% rates on car loans, and average prices that have been climbing to around 48%, $48,000.
A friend got quoted 20% for a car loan rate.
Yeah, it's nuts, man. The prices on car loans are insane. Lots are stacked actually right now. I think that there's just overall this still sentiment of this fall off. We don't know where it's going. Interest rates are definitely signaling that there's going to be some reductions next year. What does that really mean? But I'm actually more fascinated with, and I've had some more philosophical conversations with some guys around me. It's what does the world look like in 10 years? And what does society need to do to stay on track? Not economically, not and we've talked about the world where we rent everything and those kinds of structural things. I mean the culture of humanity, let's say in America for a minute. Because I think that there is some interesting trends going on that, and I'll frame it this way. I feel like there's some tradition in us as Americans, and at least me in the generation that I grew up in, the generation that I was educated in, the history that I learned through my education, the work ethic that I learned, the part of my life that I had no technology and the part of my life that I had a lot of technology, where I can see the contrast of an old world view and a new world view. And there are things in this new world view that concern me. And Vivek talks a lot about this stuff. It's rewarding merit, right? Having the ability to have hard work, being the victim mindset, showing up to work every single day, whether it's at home, fully at home, or at the office. This idea that I want to be free all the time and I want complete freedom versus I have to be able to contribute to society and start doing things that are making my community stronger. Our country is so not only politically divided, forget about politics for a minute, just culturally divided. There are people that are so binary that we can't talk about the same things in the same room anymore, safely and productively, which is part of why we launched this podcast, is to learn how to have these conversations in a healthy, productive, safe place, or even a safe way, and have contradicting views. So I just want to understand what you guys are thinking or what we're doing in our lives to help make this more productive. I feel like if we don't make intention about this in a decade or two, then the next generation is going to start taking over from a population perspective. And I'm not sure that it's correctable, if you know what I mean. And I don't know if this is like necessarily driven by elections. I don't know that. I don't have enough years under my belt to know that these things can correct over time from an election perspective. But I just think from a cultural perspective, there's an entire, I don't know what the population landscape is right now, but there's an entire population of people that are completely different. Like it's like a different animal species than people just 1 or 2 decades from an age perspective from them. So that I think is really fascinating. And we've had innovation and technology and improvements over 100 years. But the innovation and technology that we've seen today is literally changing the landscape of the human mindset, the way we behave, the things that we do, the way we interact, the way we communicate, the things that inspire us. So I'm just super fascinated about that. I'd love to hear what you guys think, or am I just totally crazy and none of this matters? But when I talk to people that are much older than me and much wiser than me, and I start to like ask these questions, like, where do you think the world's going? What do you feel like is going on? They feel lost. They're like, we don't know how to communicate to people anymore today. We're losing everything. We're losing our country. We can't take care of our people. Anyways, I'll stop ranting. You get what I'm saying. So Mikey, why don't you start?
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about, I don't know, in 4 episodes ago about, patriotism and the potential to lose. I was thinking more about that. We're not even 250 years old yet as a country. And so as I was listening to you, Ash, I sit here and think about it like sometimes I feel a little bit schizophrenic, but I don't, when you said, or does it just not matter? I'm not saying it doesn't matter. But when you were talking about like the people that you're having conversations with that are like, I just don't know how to communicate anymore. A couple of things that I'm thinking about, like through your statement, most of us can't have more than, a few hundred like solid relationships at any given time anyway. And most people probably have 20 or 30 of them. And so the reality at the end of the day is, as more and more changes in our society, I think it's noise. I think some of it's noise. I think it's far extremes. And I think that the average American still wants the same thing. And, I have a hope and I have a belief and I have a faith in our country. I don't know that any country, well, I do know this. No country ever in the existence of the world has done what we've done in 250 years, ever. It's not even 250 years yet. And that gives me hope in itself. But the thing that I'll say, just to narrow down the answer, even if 60% of the people go off their rocker and we can't communicate with them, or 70%, they're nut jobs. They're people that aren't making money. They're not doing anything that, contributes to society. And so even if that number gets higher, it just creates more opportunity for those of us that stay level headed. So I'm not disagreeing with anything that you said, because I think there is some major challenges. And, I think we are on an edge, as we talked about, 4 weeks ago. But also, like, I have a lot of hope in the American sentiment and still the American dream, whatever that means to everybody. There's still an entrepreneurial enterprise and spirit. And so even though there's a bunch of noise, and I am worried about the up and coming generations and what they're learning and what the future of business and all that looks like. But also, Aaron mentioned my son earlier, and I was actually looking at my son's Instagram. I mean, this kid is a great example. Aaron, you gave that formula of figure out what you want and, study it and then do it and then watch the game tape. And my son's a great example of this. I mean, he's 23 years old. And I mean, his Instagram, he's got videos that are over 1 million views, and he has online video programs that he's made, and he's making a good living, and he's a coach, and he actually coaches billionaires on a regular basis. And so I still have a faith in this generation. I have a faith in the next generation and our ability to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of noise out there. And again, even if, more of the population gets more wacky, it just creates more opportunity for those that are more level-headed and like your friends. I don't know that it really matters that I can't have conversations with certain people. Maybe I just have to get to a point, kind of like what we were talking about as an executive or a business owner, where I say, you know what? I'm ruthless about protecting my conversations and who I'm going to hang out with and the shit that I'm going to listen to, because I'm going to be on the 20% side of this conversation. And for the audience, I would just say, let's focus on what we can change. And again, I don't think it's politics. And Kiyosaki said this for years, but he who has the gold rules. That's very true when it comes to politics. So I just want to figure out how to make more money, create more influence, build what I want to build in my family, and let the nut jobs be nut jobs.
Mooch, what's on your mind, bro?
I've been trying to figure out whose fault it is. And not to be, and not like or blame. No, like what I've learned about. So there's a set of people essentially that so like we're talking about younger generation, right? Like, so if we're picking an age and we're saying 20 to 25, let's say. Well, a lot of them, I think COVID messed up a lot. And there is some recovery trauma happening in that age group.
Fair enough.
It's easy for us to overlook. Recently, I had conversations with several people that were young 20s that some of them didn't get to graduate from college, right? They didn't get to walk. They didn't get to have the experience. Their last year was remote. Some of them got their job fresh out of college. And then COVID hit and did mass layoffs. So laid off everybody they got hired within the first 3 months. And then they lost any momentum that they had. Plenty of people succeeded in spite of. But I think there's a significant portion of the population that there is this big gap in that kind of had an unfair, a more unfair than normal bag handed to them. And I don't know how to solve it. Meaning again, the ones that didn't get to walk with their class, or the ones that got out of college, you get the degree after, you get the job after, they've got momentum. COVID shuts everybody down. They don't have to work for the next 18 months. And now we're all right, now go into an office and work. And that's how I am as a boss. No, come into the office and work. We need to start. But instead of coming in with years of experience where they should be, they're also dealing with trauma. And I remember having a conversation with somebody because I think for the four of us, we were scared for the first 3 weeks of COVID. Then we were okay, how are we going to crush this? And I was having a conversation with somebody else saying, hey, it really affected this other person. It was scary. And I expected them to be more in my camp. And they were like, it was scary. It was really scary. I'm not the same yet. So I think there's lots of different generational gap stuff. And I think the other example is you go back to 100 years or 200 years, or I was having a conversation today with the idea of the Vikings would be able to travel from place to place and row 24 hours a day without compasses, without anything. The Islanders that would boat
without a morning routine and ice dipping, right?
Right. With the people that would boat between Fiji and Hawaii by the amount of resources and toughness, and people used to have to use 100% of their brain, 100% of their ability to survive. The best of, and the people that were world changers, they were significantly special, and technology has offset that quite a bit. And so there's work ethic issues, there's work from home issues, there's major issues that the solution is, I think, is going to be how do you bring those people into the work ethic and the work expectations of the people that run and own most of the businesses, and find those culture fits. But I also am becoming more empathetic to it. I still don't stand for it. I still am not going to let my companies run like that, but I can emotionally see the people as separate from that. and be like, it's not that you have bad work ethic because you're a POS. It's like, man, you're having to overcome something new, and how do we overcome it? And I hadn't thought, and that was a more recent realization in just like the past 3 or 4 weeks of how COVID really did impact this like big chunk of a generation that's getting a lot of judgment from people outside that generation right now.
I think Aaron is channeling Eminem's empathy.
I'm
Like it's just come.
feeling it.
Lose yourself in the music the moment.
Maddie, what do you
I
think?
find it very hard to maybe quantify, because I think really there are some pretty big forces working here, and a lot of them are systemic in a way that we have zero control over, and oftentimes it's hard to even pinpoint how those systemic things actually tie into a current situation until you got some distance, right? Some pavement in the rearview mirror of how that all played out, and that makes sense, and we can connect dots here and make a lot of these assumptions. I hadn't really thought too much about their perspective of what Aaron just mentioned. I think it's a very different time with technology in a way that it's changing underneath our nose as we speak. And I think like my generation, I'm on the older side of the millennials. I'm 35. I think the oldest millennial is 39. We're really the last generation that grew up in a pre-internet era. Everybody
that's what I'm saying. Like we're a little split.
Yeah, everybody that so I understand like the principles and the disciplines and the grit and the sacrifices that my grandparents and my great-grandparents made, and that then Gen X kind of their transition of being in an industrial era to then being in a more white-collar, business-driven education era to now everything revolves around tech. And every generation behind me, that's all they know. Like they don't know anything but technology. And so I think anybody that is not of the technology era and is like a millennial like me or older, it's hard for us to put ourselves in the shoes of the individuals that their world is just a digital world. It's just a digital era, the programming and the foundation of which was poor disciplines, habits, beliefs, all of that around the world, around jobs, around economy, around money. It's all built on the foundation of technology and the things that we know that there is some, duality to that world of technology. And so I think for me, it comes back to that one quote: hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. If you go back and look at the history, which as Mike has pointed out, of America is not that long. It is the times that we've gotten soft and divided, and we've really plugged into narratives and things that were away from American culture and our roots, our core values of what have made us strong people that have made it the country that it is, birthed out of many of the times that we've had the biggest growths spurts in America have been out of ashes, have been out of hardship, have been out of, pretty sad times. And so I think we're kind of in that vortex right now. I think we're in this tornado, and all we can kind of see is the walls spinning around us. And it's hard to make sense of that until the storm really passes and you look at the damage and you look at what we got to do to clean up, to get back on track and rebuild, metaphorically, the community of America. And I think we're in the process of that right now. That being said, I think that socialism now more than ever actually has a real chance with our youth. And I think that the government, with programming in public education and social programs, and now in marketing and media, in what's cool, in what trends and topics we're talking about and promoting, those are all little seeds of socialism, in my opinion. And again, take this with a grain of salt and a macro perspective. I'm not saying everything is, there to promote socialism. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is we are more of a society that empowers and enables the opposite of grit and hard work and grind and hustle and those things than we are the it's okay. Don't worry about it. We're such an enlightened group now through social media, through everybody having a podcast or a microphone or a little, box in their hand that they can record a video on. And that's an interesting beast to try and tame and to see the ripple effects that has. And I don't even think we've seen little glimpses of it, but I don't think we've seen the real impacts of what social media and technology and how it's shaping and forming the younger generations and what the future looks like. I think there's going to be so much good that comes from it. So let me start with that. But I also think that it is a very slippery slope that could lead to, in 10 years, a bunch of people saying, why do we need capitalism, or why do we need this governing body, or why do we need these things when we could just have one person or group, or you get what I'm saying? So I just think it's one of those things where it's a very interesting time. It's hard for us to really make true assessments and judgments of what's really going on, because I think we're in the eye of the storm. I think there's still a lot of time that has to pass, and I think we can totally course correct.
Ash, before you jump to somebody else on that, I think my contradiction or my non, I think Maddie, I think you have some really good points, but I was having this conversation with some younger, liberals recently turned conservatives. And I do think that even though the younger generation is always the most socialist, for lack of a better word, the most liberal, the most whatever, there are still sections of them that do become successful.
Agreed.
That do start to have higher incomes, and then do start to see the income of taxes and their tax money getting spent ways other than they want. And there's this shift. So I think that just traditionally, when we're all younger, like I think 20 years ago, we were all more liberal than we are today. We were all more socialist than we are today. I know I was, right? And then when I started to get more successful and pay taxes. So I do have this belief that a lot of that becomes outgrown, that it doesn't mean there won't be disconnects in society. But I think that also as people get older, they change the views more to like, wait, but now that I'm successful, I'm going to keep more of my money, and that kind of rides. When you don't have money, it's really easy to be socialist.
I do.
Right? When you're not making any money, it's really easy to go like, the rich guys should be paying our bills. So anyway, I just think there's another side to that for sure.
I agree with that. My only counterpoint to that, because I agree with that. You would ask, I mean, dude, you can go see where I grew up and who I was hanging. I was so far Democrat, like conservatives. I hated conservatives, right? Like that staunchy, feel to me was terrible as I grew up, and my values and my family and my lifestyle changed, right? It was one of those things where my ideology, my decision making, my politics, so I agree with you on that. The only thing that I think will be interesting is the soil in which our country was in, and the values and the narratives during when we were raised, and kind of the same trajectory or timeline that many of the youth are in now. I think the soil of values and conversations are very, very different than the conversations around the values and the opportunities and the tools and resources that we had available back to us then. Even if you weren't a conservative, there was still certain things that I think were there, but just weren't present until we grew up a little bit more. I think the soil for a lot of the youth is just different. I'm not saying it's bad soil. I'm just saying it's different. And I'm curious to see if that course corrects over time, right? And they age out into having different ideologies and things like that, or if it just stays on that trend and it becomes more and more of a norm, because that is what they were kind of birthed out of in terms of young adults to, adults to obviously established individuals with families and businesses and things like that.
There was an article that I recently read that influencers are no longer just influencers. They're actually professional entertainers. And I think that there was another poll, like, I don't know, it was like maybe a year ago, where if you polled young kids in China and young kids in the United States, the Chinese young kids said, I want to be an engineer, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a scientist, I want to be a doctor. in America, they said they want to be an influencer. And one of the things, Maddie, that what you're talking about, and I'd love to scratch this with you guys, is like my parents were my number one influence and maybe my small circle of family. That was my soil, right? Today, I get on my phone or young kids get on their phone and their soil is not just their parents, but Elon Musk and everyone else in the world. And there was a really great YouTube video that just came out recently about how, we can justify the behaviors of some of these most influential people because we think that overall they're net positive for society. Maybe social media, Instagram, influencers, large business tycoons, whatever. They're net positive for society. But that doesn't mean that we can ignore the negatives. And we're sort of ignoring some of these negative things because the soil hasn't been filtered or cleaned up. And so I'm just curious to see what really is going to happen.
So I've got
because we have to be able to control those influences in the minds. And you said we all start liberal, we all start socialist until you start making money. Is money the only thing that makes you conservative or
money
more logical? No. And then plus, like we're already having this trend where in universities and colleges, like they're so far left that it's kind of crazy. So, Mikey, go ahead.
When you say like we have to control the narrative, that's part of the problem with the conversation. Like,
yeah,
it's the extremes. And again, like at the end of the day, I mean, we like this present group included, for the most part, we would say we have to control XYZ. Well, then there's another group that's saying we have to control XYZ. That's and the reality is, when you guys were talking about ruthless earlier, I was just thinking about Elon Musk. And when you look back, so there's the extremes on both ends. And I have a feeling, and I don't know when this is going to happen, whether it's 5 years from now or 15 years from now, but we probably are going to get to a further extreme on the socialism spectrum. And then there's going to be some kind of like rubber band effect. I mean, when you look at unions coming into play, the industrial era was like one of the most prosperous eras ever. And people were just happy to have a job after the Great Depression. But then you fast forward 15 years and unions are everywhere. Why? Because we don't like the way we're being treated. Like, shame on the big guy. And then you have people like Elon Musk that are saying, piss off. I was thinking about the ruthless conversation. And he's like, we're not going to unionize and we're going to do things this way. And so you have these ruthless leaders. I think we're going to probably see some level of, Maddie, you were talking about when they actually get to a point as we get older and we start paying taxes and we see what's really happening. I do feel for the youth because they are being indoctrinated because of we have to control the narrative conversation. Mm-hmm. But also they're going to get to a point where they're going to grow up and they're going to understand. And I hope it's not too far gone. But just like the union rubber band, everybody wanted a job and they were thankful for industry. And then fast forward 10 years and we hate industry. Like and I'm not saying that unions are bad or not bad. I ran a contracting company for a lot of years and I was like anti-union. I was in the camp of like, if you guys try to unionize, and the union did try to get my guys, I'll just shut down. Like, I'm not going to become a union. So maybe I am kind of anti-union, but I understand the sentiment behind it. And the reality is, like, I don't think the idea of trying to control anything is really what's going to work. It's just, again, I think at the end of the day, it's doing what we can in our circles of influence and hoping that enough people want true freedom. This is the first case of democracy ever. And as we said 4 weeks ago, it's on the edge. But also I believe that enough people have seen what democracy truly is, that when we get 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road and we've missed it, hopefully we're going to want to come back to it.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at, what's his name? Argentina's new president. Have you guys been following what he's doing?
Yes.
President Javier Milei. They tried socialism. Their governing bodies pushed it hard. They saw a handful of years underneath that policy, that rule, and ultimately it led to economic destruction in many facets of their currency, of their economy, and it got to a point where so many people were dissatisfied. The pendulum had swung way further than I would ever love it to see swing in America. And the beauty is, if you can trust in the democratic process of an election, that you have the ability to vote somebody in. He's a Trump-esque kind of figure. He'll cuss, he'll call people out, he'll say you're an idiot, whatever, but he also shows love and all these things. But I just thought it was really interesting. 18 days ago, since he was inaugurated in Argentina, since then, he's eliminated 12 out of 21 cabinet positions. He's fired 5,000 government employees. He's ended 380 government regulations, banned woke language in the military, bill to affirm the right to self-defense, bill to legalize homeschooling of kids, proposal to punish all right organizations, future welfare cuts for road blocking, legalized paying contracts in Bitcoin, privatization of state-run companies, opened up the Argentina oil industry. And there's like a list that just goes on and on and on, right? The point that I'm getting at, I think, is if we are team human and we're betting that at the end of the day, all of us, if we strip down all the narratives, all the programming, all the subconscious shit that we've picked up throughout our life along the way, deep down inside, we all really want the same thing. We want to thrive. We want to be happy. We want to make an impact. We want to feel connection and meaningful relationships and experiences. And so when you see that get to a point where people feel like that's no longer a possibility for them, I think that's where you see stuff like this happening. And so I'm just betting on the fact that I have this healthy level of paranoia around, I don't like what I'm seeing, so let me be, aware of it. But I think like what Mike said, Ashish, to your point, I'm just looking at it and going, I can't control shit in this grand scheme of this machine. So what can I control? Well, that's why I'm doubling down on building my commercial real estate investment community this year. I know that the soil that I fertilize, that I tend to every day, that I invest my time and energy and resources in can birth other people who share similar sentiments, goals, values. And I think we have a lot of leaders of companies, of communities, of organizations that are leaning into that same mentality, saying, I can't change what Bud Light does, or I can't change what, this company does over here. I can't change what Nancy Pelosi is going to put into, policy next year. What I can do, though, is control my company, our values, the people that come to us to learn, to grow, to thrive. And I think that ripple effect is how we build back one by one from a strong foundation, from quality, soil. And that's what I know I can control. And that's where I'm starting. So that's why I'm focused on my commercial real estate investment community and, the people that I get to connect with. That's why I'm focused on being a part of, groups and conversations like this, and why obviously we love and other people that are listening. If you're watching this right now and you're not subscribed, right? These are the kind of conversations we have every single week, because we're trying to focus on the things that we can control. Take the macro, what's up in the clouds, bring it down to earth, get to work in the dirt, and trust in that process that over a long timeline, many people share those same common values deep down inside. Sometimes, right, we just layer on some things that maybe sway our perspective, our decision. But I think ultimately America is going to come out stronger than ever. And I'm never, ever going to bet on anything but that.
Don't bet against America. That's what I learned from that for sure.
Yep.
Mikey, let's bring it home. Any last thoughts before I bring us home?
Well, I was just sharing an article, which is irrelevant, but this just came out in Yahoo Finance. Lululemon's billionaire founder slams the company's diversity and inclusion efforts. You've got to be clear that you don't want certain customers coming in. And I'm not sharing that because
interesting.
I'm right with him or left with him or whatever. But the reality is, when we have more and more companies, Maddie mentioned Bud Light. I mean, there's gonna be a culture war. There has been a culture war, and I think it's gonna get stronger. I think it's easier at the corporate level for people to fall into the left side narrative because there's so many people coming out of the government indoctrination camps. Universities that have this left leaning tendency. And so I think, just even back to our executive conversation, that's if 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 the CEO of Bud Light was on here and you said, what was the worst hire you ever made? They'd probably say our marketing executive that ran the transgender ad. I don't know. But the reason why I shared this other thing from Lululemon is because I think we are going to continue to see a culture war. And again, I think it's a really loud left. I think it's a really loud right. And then I think there's the majority of Americans that are somewhere in the middle. But I think it's going to get uglier before it gets prettier. So
I think there's something that's true about how entrepreneurs, business leaders, community builders are building their own little cocoons. Like we're doing it, everybody here is doing it. We're building our own little masterminds, communities, circles of influence, because perhaps we feel like you're right. There's so much shit going on that all I can do is create my own little ecosystem of people that want to thrive in my own world and thrive together, etc. So I think that's a trend that's not going to stop. I think that is a trend, though. I don't think that existed, even a decade ago. So maybe in the Rotary clubs, right, of the world.
If this isn't, I always follow the money. What are the big boys and girls doing? What are the big private equity groups? What are the big VC shops? What are they doing? Where are they putting their energy, their attention? They're betting with their dollars all the time, right? And usually they're, let's say, more times right than not right. They've got more resources, more experience, more capital. And Mark Andreessen just put out a big article on personal influencer brands, and personal influencer communities are where they are staking their investment when it comes to backing these communities who have already built true, like through and through, trust, integrity, alignment, this commonality in terms of sharing in values, of mission. Because when you get behind a community that is so aligned, it's kind of like, reminds me of the movie 300. 300 was a bunch of badass motherfuckers on one united front that took down thousands of individuals. And it just shows, right, the power and the progress and the achievement a small group of dangerously aligned individuals can have over a large pool of people that are fractured and segmented and ultimately not in that same wavelength. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that continues to evolve. And if you're listening to this right now and you don't have a community, and a community could start by just putting up a little broadcast channel on your Instagram group and letting people join that, right? Like, it doesn't need to be crazy, investments of time and money. But I think if you don't have a community or brand behind you, it's something that I believe in the next 5 years, the biggest businesses, the biggest brand opportunities and revenue generating opportunities and things along those lines will be coming out of small groups and communities that people have really invested the time to find those individuals that are aligned on so many levels, and they serve and they support and they bring value in those capacities. That's where I think there's going to be massive opportunities for investors, for business owners, or for individuals to just elevate and level up in really big ways. So that's what I'm doubling down on. Community and connection, I think, is going to be the big focus for at least me in 2024. And I think for a lot of people going into the next few years.
I love it, guys. Interesting conversation. Took a little different turn than I expected when we started, but fun. As we close up, just wanted to continue to remind the audience, if you're listening to us on YouTube, leave us comments, make sure you subscribe. Remember, the cost of listening is that you have to share it with somebody that may get benefit from this or our community. Remember to leave in the comments a vote. We really want to do the King's Table live event sometime in 2024. So vote where you guys want us to do that, or what you're looking for, or what you guys want to gain from that. In the next few weeks, we may do a best of 2023 and create some predictions and some votes. So what do you want us to vote on? What do you, best book, best podcast? Who do you think is going to be president? What's the best business leader of 2023 and 2024? Leave us some comments down below in our comment section of what you guys want to hear from us in the next few weeks. But thanks so much for listening to the King's Table. Thank you guys so much for listening. This is the King's Table. Peace.